Fab,
Absolutely.
okay. So we've talked about loads in terms of retention, in terms of the other strategies we can take, because we know, can't throw money at this. We are not in an affluent sector. We're in a sector that is struggling every day to, make
Hmm.
sure we can manage those costs. But one thing, and you mentioned it a little bit because you talked about why managers talk to you about why they leave. There's too much on them. They're experiencing burnout. We hear that word all of the time at the moment.
Oh yeah.
And you've mentioned in terms of making sure we've got that place to talk in terms of those
Hmm.
regular catch ups, or whatever we title them. But is there any other tips for employers about prioritising staff well-being and helping reduce that burnout, do you think?
Absolutely. And again, it links back to what I've spoke to previously. It's about living and breathing your employer values. If you are positioning yourself as an advocate for employee mental health and well-being, um, but the pillar that supports that is you've got uh, a is it an employee assistance program or access to an app that provides mental health care, but there's no feet on the ground actually investing time in it. uh, it's diluted and your staff aren't feeling it 100%. So that value, if you're really selling that value, and it's a big one in this sector, because the people in these services oftentimes they've got their own families that they see a lot less than they do of the people that they're providing the care for and they're working with, and things go wrong in our personal lives. That we experience losses, we experience births, marriages. There's so much that goes on outside of work that, as an employer, and now more than ever, we have to embrace that, because if you're not, someone else is. So yes, you've got an employee assistance program. Yes, you've got access to mental health care via an app or an online GP, whatever it may be. But those individual check-ins, and you don't need to have 17 different check-ins. If you having one check-in a month, like a monthly one-to-one, and it covers off what and how are things at home, do you need this, do you need any support here, how are the hours, etc., etc. It's making sure that you are showing that you support people outside of work. And no, we can't offer people 40 days holiday a year in this sector. It's just not feasible. But have your birthday off. If you move house, have 2 days additional extra leave, so that those big life events are covered, but it's not as a huge cost to a business.
Mm.
And it helps, it gives that feeling of support and unity. And do you know what, they do value me, and I do know that if life gets a little bit tough outside of work, I'm not going to lose my job because of it. I know that I've got that support. So that fear factor isn't there. And it just has this positive psychological impact on the workforce at all levels. And it should be at all levels,
Yeah.
100% at all levels, not just your senior leadership team. It has to be through and through the business. So, an understanding culture. I'm very aware that there are instances where it's taken to the nth degree and people possibly abuse the situation and think, oh well, they won't know I'm not moving house, I'm just going to say I'm moving house. And it's making sure that you can identify when someone are kind of taking it a little bit too far and taking advantage of how understanding the business is being. But ultimately, again, it comes down to how you've trained your deputies, your managers, your senior managers on how to handle personal life circumstances.
But it comes down to those relationships, doesn't it? And if we're
Yeah,
not making
yeah.
time to have those conversations, we
Mm.
can't build those relationships, so we
No,
don't build the trust.
no.
So, it's that catalogue, that kind of
Mm,
domino effect.
mm,
Yeah, it made me think in terms of when you talked about mental health, and we talk about well-being being paramount,
mm.
a few years ago, and we do still see it. But it was really about that, right? Well, okay, mental health is the, big topic of conversation.
Mhm.
So businesses went out and trained lots of staff in mental
Mental
health first aid,
first aid. Yeah,
which is absolutely fantastic.
fundamental.
Do
Yeah.
not get me wrong. But they went to the training before looking at but is this, actually looking at that wellbeing strategy, and is this what we need? Mental health first aid training is incredible. We've done a lot of it. We have a lot of trained people within the organisation to both work with our learners, but also work with our teams and what have you. And the value of it is huge. But you've really got to understand what it is you're trying to achieve in doing this. And we see this, don't we? Like, we'll put a stick in plaster. So we'll go to this is the next watchword, we'll do this training. Actually, we really need to get to the grips with what are our team feeling, what are our colleagues feeling. And so it's gaining that feedback. I tell you, we get all sorts of visitors now when we're in meetings, don't we? But it is getting that real understanding. How often do we, and not just on a one-to-one basis, but bigger, how often do we take the opportunity or go and seek the opportunity to get feedback? Because unless we're actually getting feedback from our colleagues on what real situation is, we're assuming things, and we might be putting the wrong solution in place. So, that's, for me, that's really key as well, is making sure we're engaging in those conversations with teams.
100% agreed. And equally, I've actually had this, I've said these words to a client before. Do you find yourself one of these organizations that says, oh God, we best go and do that training? Because if you are, you're not buying into it. And you do it's for the wrong
it doesn't
reasons.
have the value that you're looking for.
And I've had one client say, do you know what, we're guilty of that. We have done that.
And let's be honest, we all will have done it at some point.
Of course. Oh God, we best get that done. When GDPR came in, we best get that done. But now look how it's so important that we follow it. But I think there's a lot of people that didn't take it seriously at the time. And I think the biggest thing for clients is they don't feel they have the time to work on the communications of how they're going to roll things out. Don't think they've got the time to take people off the floor to just really talk about their ethos and what culture they're trying to build. And it doesn't have to be done that way. If anything, you can, rather than paying a recruiter to replace somebody, you can have a business consultant come in once a month and they can do all these check-ins with somebody, which often works better because they're in a safer space, because it's someone who's not directly working for the company. So they'll offload as much as they can to a third party who can then take it away, digest it, put a kind of action plan together, present it to the senior management team and the board and say, look, if you don't do this, you're going to lose a really good member of the team, and holds the leadership team to account on delivering on those actions and signpost them in the direction of how to implement things or how to communicate things so that it's heard and felt through the organization. Because that's another key. People can hear it, but if they don't feel it, they will vote with their feet and they will go, because it's just lip service and people don't take to it very well. So it is, again, goes back to that. What are your values? How are you living and breathing them? Are you communicating it? Are you training your workforce to be able to live and breathe them as well and follow them also? And making this whole culture fully embedded in the business. So I could go on and on, and probably will.
And again, we come to that short-term, long-term view, don't we? Like we did before with recruitment, recruit for now or recruit for the future. But the same goes here. Yes, on a day-to-day basis, trying to step back from the business is hard, but if you don't make that time, it's going to cost more. You're going to lose people, you're going to lose time, you're going to lose all of those things. And as you say, it might be independent, it might be how you decide to do it in the business, but it's got to be done to move forward. It's one of those, take a step back to take 5 steps forward. And we've got to make that time. The only people, are the decision makers, the leaders of businesses that can make those and say, actually, no, we do need to take a step back. And that'll look different for every business, but there's loads of innovative solutions about. And that's my next question. Can you think of any examples where you've seen some really innovative solutions, whether it be to recruitment or retention, or what organizations have done in the real world to make a difference?
So I guess that leads on quite nicely. So let's take a larger organization that I'd spoken to, and they were recruiting for a number of managers all over the country and this, that, the other. And their kind of briefing call was, well, it was good. They went through the details of the services they were managing, the kind of, the top level information that you'd need. This is the size of the service, this is CQC rating, this is how many staff are there. But then we kind of, what I wanted to get into the granular detail of, okay, well, what's the dynamic of the team in this service? And what in this particular instance, I was talking to an internal recruitment team, a member of the team. What's the dynamic of this team down in this area, for example? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't been there. Okay, well, can I talk to the hiring manager, the manager of the service, just so I can get an idea? Oh, no, it's all dealt with by us. Absolutely fine. But you've got to recruit people that fit in that team. You've got to be able to do it. So anyway, we had a number of managerial posts and we were working on it, and it's like, okay, well, what are the kind of benefits? What's the culture? What are your values? I will email it over. No, I want you to tell me, because when you're interviewing these candidates, you're going to have to tell them. Oh, we'll just email the package to them. And it's like, no, it needs to be communicated so that people can get that buy-in and can hear how that passion comes across, so that they can see, actually, they sound really proud to work for that company. And that case study was really good. Oh, well, we haven't really got any cases. So anyway, I kind of, my little, not alarm bells, but my little light bulb was going off in the back of my head, thinking there's a real opportunity here to better this process. In which case I went to one of the directors and said, can we just have a chat? I think I've got an opportunity here that can help us have more success in the hiring process and attract more candidates. And we had a chat, and they kind of said that we're just too big to be able to roll out this culture and train everybody on this and this and da da da. So I said, the solution I gave was, one person doesn't need to do all of this. You just need to identify some champions that will be able to do it. And then that gives them some responsibility. They feel part of a kind of committee of champions that are championing the employee values and the attraction and retention. And you're giving them a bit of responsibility. And they are then, in turn, sharing that with the people around them, who naturally will start. It's like that herd mentality. If you get one champion, they will start to infiltrate the rest of the team. So you don't need one person traveling the whole country banging the drum about, these are our employee values, you must say this. It's getting a community within the business that fully support what the culture you want to achieve, and they will shout that from the rooftops for you. Have your committee meetings, have your idea forums, and bring things to the table. Have someone take responsibility for how that's communicated to the wider business. Celebrate the successes when you hire somebody as a result of this new culture shift. And it's, rather than being focused on hiring, CQC outcomes, it's right. If we've got happy, strong teams, the results will follow. Honest to God, they will. And that goes for any workplace environment.
And what a great opportunity to, succession plan and see potential leaders of the future. If people want to take on that role and want to volunteer for that role and become a champion, then you're already on a journey with that person to their next stage, aren't you? So,
and do you know what's even worked sometimes? I mean, it's a risk and it's a bit rogue, but I've seen people who have been a little bit obstructive when it comes to change, and a little bit like, oh God, it's all nonsense, I'm not doing that. If you make them a champion of something, they come into their own, and all of a sudden that mindset shifts from a negative to, oh, actually, I've got some responsibility here, and what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing and what the company are trying to do is actually making me feel a bit better about it. So that person that's usually an earworm does a 360 and they then become your biggest champion. I wouldn't advise it in all circumstances, but I have seen it work, and it has paid off.
But taking people on the journey makes a difference, doesn't it? You said before, when you were talking about all of these things, to get people to buy in, ultimately it comes down to why. Why are we doing it? If we
Yeah.
don't tell that story well enough of
Yeah.
why, and also show people what difference it's going to make to them as an individual, because that's the
Yeah.
bit you mentioned before was they want to know how it's going to impact them.
Yeah.
Because we all do. We're naturally human
What's in
beings.
it for me?
What's in it for me? How's it going to impact me?
Mhm.
What am I going to gain from it? All of those
Mhm.
things. Well, if you can show that to somebody who has a voice,
Mhm.
and whether they choose to use that for the good or the bad, we need to get them on the side of using it for the
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's going to make a huge difference because that
Mm.
one negative person, if you don't turn that around, it can put pay to. They talk about 80% of change projects failing because we
Mhm.
don't manage it well. But
Yeah.
the biggest part of that is not taking people on that journey. So whatever the change is,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's really important. No,
Mm.
I like that road tip. Always love a road tip.
No, I'd approach it with caution, but I've seen it work on more than one
Yeah.
occasion, and it's worked really, really well. Um, I've even done it in my own teams before, so it is tried and tested. If you kind of get people on board, and like you say, they see the value. People might another example. So that was with a larger organisation who kind of thought, oh, it's just too difficult to roll anything out with take someone. That was the way around it. And then other clients will look maybe a much smaller organisation, one domiciliary care company, for example, an independent branch. Oh no, there's no issues, and But they were on their third manager in about 18 months. You're like, something's not quite right. I want to help you, but I'm not going to keep placing managers if they're leaving. So what's going on? And when we broke it down, the manager was doing the coordinating, the care shifts. They were doing the business development, the quality, the compliance. They were just doing
Too much. Yeah.
everything, and it was a very open and honest conversation with with the owner of the business. Yes, it might seem like a huge investment by hiring a registered manager and a coordinator at the same time, and a few additional care staff, but it's not going to cost you any more than 3 managers in the last 18 months has. So you might as well just bite the bullet and invest in that head count now. But before you do, let's write a full induction plan, a full employee value proposition. What are your values? How are you going to demonstrate that you're adhering to them and delivering on them, so that we can pitch that to the candidates? And no, they didn't hire. They had a registered manager and a few extra support staff. Then they waited a while longer before getting a coordinator. But ultimately, having that additional support, so the registered manager wasn't having to go out and do the care calls after they'd finished a full day's work from 8 till 6 o'clock, allowed the settling in process to be a lot smoother than the people before had. And they put in not an objective, a target in place that said, once the branch is delivering this amount of care hours, at that point you can recruit your care coordinator. So there were those clear parameters from the offset of, this is how many care staff we've got, this is how often you'll have to do on call, all the time in this instance, because they're the only next senior person. And at this amount of hours, you can get a care coordinator. And they delivered on that. The client had upheld their promise, delivered on that. And as far as I'm aware, that manager's still there today, and the branch is doing very well. But it took a good 18 months of just kind of these losses, people leaving, before the client was like, okay, right, I'm ready to listen, we're ready to make a change. And we'd
Yeah.
built
And
that
that, I mean,
the trust was there. But
that's as hard as anything, isn't it?
yeah,
That listening to, because, well, we've always done it this way. They just haven't been the right people. Trying
yeah.
to break that mindset. But again, it comes back to that taking a step back, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm,
Because whatever sector you work in, new rules, new
mm-hmm,
regulations, changes to how we have to do things because people are telling us,
mm.
just means we just keep adding stuff. We don't
Yeah,
take the chance to go back and reflect and go, does this process or does this role still work in its
mm-hmm,
entirety? You do
mm-hmm.
have to take that step back and go, what's not working? Or, if we started this again, I always say it's a great question to ask. If we started this business again, or we introduced this role again, what would we want it to be? Because only then do you say, oh God, well, that's what it should be, but they're
Yeah,
doing this, they're doing the other, and they're doing all this process. Actually, it goes through 3 people before it gets to there. Why on earth does it not go from there to there?
yeah.
Ultimately, it comes back to how are we impacting our service users? How are we impacting our colleagues on a day-to-day basis? What are we trying to achieve and how are we trying to achieve it? But if we break it all down and take that opportunity to go, you know, if we were to start again, how would we do it differently?
Yeah.
We haven't got all of the boundaries that we create for ourselves over time. So we do need to take it. It's so important to take that step back, isn't it?
Absolutely.